What they do, what it is, this is Orion aka Brass Balls, another installment of Deep Dive Tape Stash, where I'll take a dive into these singles from the past and let you know about some jewels you may have not been privy to before. But before we even take a dive into this, I want y'all to take some time, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Orion Hip Hop is that channel. Appreciate everybody that's been showing love. Drop a comment, like, reshare, all that. Always appreciated. Now let's take a deep dive into this one. This is Common's I Used to Love Her. Now this had to be the single that put Common on the map. He had an album prior to this, Can I Borrow $1? But it really didn't hit like his second sophomore follow-up, Resurrection. And this is the one that really set it off for him. Possibly the first ode to hip-hop music. One of the first tracks where some MC personifies hip-hop into something. You've seen this done a couple of times. Cormega did this later with his album The Realness. I had a track called American Beauty. GP Wu did this as well with their album Against the Grain. There's a track on there where they talk about hip-hop and personify it. And then The Roots covered this on their album Things Fall Apart, and actually featured Common on that very song as well. Common has been known to do this a couple of times after, which is shocking given that he did it so well with this track, and then done it with The Roots, did it with a track with Erykah Badu. So he's like kind of like the king of covering this concept. And go check out the Questions Hip Hop with my homies Midas the Beast and Sean. Questions Hip Hop, they got an episode, Making Illmatic, where they break down Things Fall Apart, and they have some interesting factoids and funny commentary, especially involving this track on the Roots album featuring Common. Go check it out. Now the beat got a real summer vibe to it, even like a pool party vibe to it, I would say. It was produced by No ID, and No ID is somebody who is now regarded as a legend. Around this time, nobody really knew of No ID, and he was pretty much the bedrock for the sound that is the Resurrection album from Common. One thing that was great to see was No ID's reemergence in hip-hop. I remember a lot of people were questioning as to why him and Common weren't working together much after Common's third album, One Day It'll All Make Sense, and what happened in that relationship, and where even No ID went from there, because he had a solo album that kind of flew under the radar for whatever reason. I don't think the label that it was with pushed it properly. And then he had a reemergence. I remember seeing him doing production for Ghostface on the Pretty Tony album, and the production was really dope. And then, of course, came back and fully reemerged when he did Jay-Z's Death of Autotune, the DOA album, and then went on to produce for a whole slew of cats, and including Jay-Z's album 444, which is hailed as one of Jay-Z's top albums in a lot of circles. So it was great to see NOID reemerge in hip-hop. Now the samples on I Used to Love Her, the main sample, The Changing World by George Benson, flawless how he sampled that, made it work. The drums taken from Fly Fly, The Root Shoot. Never heard that until I did my research. Those are the main samples, but interesting enough, although it's not a sample, Common reinterpolates something Eazy-E said on Still Talking when he says, "So easily I approach." And this line, coupled with some other lines, led to the beef with Ice Cube. Because soon after that line, Common was basically saying she went to the West Coast, Afrocentricity was a thing of the past, she got fucked, got into the industry more, and she was ruined. And Cube took offense to that and went at Common on a song called West Side Slaughterhouse with his group West Side Connection, Mac 10, and WC. Of course, that led to Common responding back with a crazy-ass diss track called The Bitch in You, produced by Pete Rock. And then Ice Cube went on to, kind of throw another jab at Common on another West Side Connection track called Who Bangin'. And from there, the beef died down, and it was finally squashed with Minister Farrakhan intervening. This was in the late 90s after Biggie had already died. So there was a call to start ending a lot of beefs. And I think what's interesting about this is the fact that Ice Cube was dissing Common on this West Side Connection track. And around that time, with the East-West beef going on, or the perceived East-West war going on, Common, although he was from Chicago, and Chicago is the Midwest, he was very much known as an East Coast MC just because of the type of beats he would get on, how he would structure his rhyme patterns. He kind of fell into like people thinking that he was an East Coast MC, although he was very vocal about being from Chicago and Chicago being the Midwest. But, you know, I say that also because of that track, West Side Slaughterhouse. There's a line in there where Ice Cube says, you know, hip hop started in the West. And, you know, I think that sort of thing really fed into the East-West quote-unquote war. When people think of the East-West war, they always mention Pac and Biggie, but I think West Side Connection and what they were doing with Bow Down and, you know, a lot of the rhetoric that they were putting out there, like they were fighting for the West Coast respect, no doubt, but it could definitely be perceived as something else, especially when you had records that came out prior to that from Tim Dog with Fuck Compton and everything. And another thing that the West Side Connection was battling with was Cypress Hill. You know, Cypress Hill had dissed Ice Cube on No Rest for the Wicked on their album Temples of Boom. So they ended up going at Cypress Hill on a track called King of the Hill because of that. And I always wondered if this beef would have kept going, had the beef kept escalating, if Common would have collabed with DJ Muggs and Cypress Hill to diss Ice Cube and the West Side Connection. I always thought that if the beef would have kept going on some rap shit, of course, that shit would have been dope to see, because I've never heard Common over Muggs production. And Cypress Hill, although from LA, were very much perceived as an East Coast group early on. There was a couple of reasons for that, them being featured in the movie Juice, and How I Could Just Kill a Man was filmed in New York. So there was a lot of confusion early on with Cypress Hill as well. But Cypress Hill and Ice Cube thankfully squashed their beef. And, you know, I don't got to speak too much on that because we ain't even on Cypress Hill right now. Let me get back to Common. Anyways, Drink Champs just recently did a dope-ass episode with Common and Pete Rock, because Common and Pete Rock got an album coming out that so far sounds real dope from the tracks I've heard. So go check out the Drink Champs episode, because Common really goes into detail on the Bitch and You and the whole beef and everything and how it was squashed and all that. And then it leads me to the B-side of this tape cassette. The B-side of this tape cassette is Communism. Communism, to me, is one of the standout tracks on this album from Common, and one of my favorite tracks on it. Although as a Cuban, seeing that name, can't front, I was a little bit like, oye, pero espera aquí, ¿qué pasa con esta mierda? Este tipo va a hablar de comunista ahora. Este tipo le gusta Castro, que venga, pasa aquí. Esto la mierda para aquí. But thankfully, the track was not on some pro-communism shit. It's just a fly track with dope wordplay. Track itself is fire, and even in that Drink Champs episode, there's a part where he talks about how the chicka, you know, how that whole beginning of the track came about. So that was real interesting to catch at the Drink Champs episode. Production wise, again, this is NOID, sampled Freddie Hubbard, the surest things can change. Dope sample. The drums came from James Taylor and the Flying Machine, of all people. I would have never thought, you know, you'd get crazy drums from there, but yeah, man, he made it work. And also another Freddie Hubbard sample, Brigit. So that's real dope on this production, man. I really dig. This is one of my favorite tracks off the Resurrection album. I will say, out of like, you know, what Common does well is deliver pretty dope albums. Resurrection is one of those, and he locks in with one producer or maybe 2 or 3 producers at most and makes it work. So Resurrection, One Day It'll All Make Sense, like Water for Chocolate, B, and Electric Circus, even though Electric Circus gets ragged on, to me are all solid albums, and I'm really looking forward to this album from him and Pete Rock to see what they cooked up, because when Common locks in with one producer, he kind of delivers pretty well. So I'm looking forward to hearing that album. Shout out to D-Zine. He's the dude that is accredited on here with the dope ass Common Sense Tiger handwriting on there, man. Like, fucking fresh as hell. I love dope logos and dope shit. I mean, Common didn't continue using that one. He would later on go to this logo over here, but I like this logo that Design did for Common. I think it's dope. Got that ill hand styles on it. Love it all day. So yeah, bro, like the tape cassette itself, it looks like I've had this shit for years. It's pretty beat up, and I got it off eBay for like $3 or so. It was worth it. It came in a bundle with a bunch of other tapes that I got, and when it came, it actually came broken, as you can see here, like just the cover itself. But you know your boy, I don't let shit ride like that. Broke out the glue gun, boom, 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 made it happen, and there you go. You know, now it's part of the collection. It's refined. It is what it is, dog. I got my jewels, my gems. I gotta keep my gems right. You feel me? One thing I want to make sure I touch on before I end this video. I knew who Common was back in the days because of this song, because of the other song, Resurrection, the title track off of his second album, of course. But I kind of really slept on him and slept on Resurrection. It wasn't until a homegirl in high school, Janice, happened to have Resurrection. She let me hold it. I was able to get a burnt copy of it. And that's honestly how I became a Common fan. Even more so because of the Resurrection album and finally getting to hear tracks like Communism that I wasn't up on earlier. Once again, not a pro-communism song. So shout out to Janice from back in the day. Thank you for tapping in to another deep dive tape stash. I hope you enjoyed this diving mission that we just went on. Appreciate y'all. Peace.